You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Evidence revealed as a judge orders Trump's would-be assassin to be held without bail. What we're learning about an alleged letter he wrote admitting a plot to kill the former president.
I urge you, take this warning seriously. Please get out of harm's way now.
A stern warning from Israel as it deepens its military campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What we know about the heavy fire being exchanged as the casualties and the fears of a larger regional war mount. And hurricane watch is on where and when it is expected the next storm will hit in the United States and how strong the storm could be when it does. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Police authorities and the FBI in Birmingham, Alabama, seeking public help in finding who was behind a mass shooting over the weekend that left 4 people dead and as many as 17 injured. That shooting occurring outside a popular night spot in Birmingham's 5 Points South District. Police say it was possibly a murder for hire scheme, as at least one of the victims who was killed had an extensive criminal history and is believed to be the target of the attack. Now, Crime Stoppers and the FBI, they are offering a reward for this. They're putting up $50,000 for up to a $100,000 reward as authorities hope this money will bring forward new information. Birmingham's police, or mayor rather, has said the suspects had a total disregard for life as they hit several unintended targets.
You see, it's easy to see people in a line who most likely are unarmed because to enter a club, you can't have a weapon on you. And so on one hand, as heinous as this was, it was also one of the most cowardly things we've also seen. They're cowards.
Authorities are investigating whether it was gang-related. Officials say 12 of the injured have been released, but 5 victims remain hospitalized. Their conditions are unclear. And right now we're tracking new crime numbers released. Here's what we know. Violent crime dropped around 3% last year when compared to the year before. That's according to the FBI. Murder and non-negligent manslaughter dropped nearly 12%. And the reported number of rapes dropped by more than 9%. However, car thefts, those went up nearly 13%. Critics say this data does not paint the full picture because some cities are not reporting their crime stats to the FBI. And tonight, the alleged would-be assassin of former President Donald Trump will be held without bail pending a trial after a detention hearing earlier. The order coming as prosecutors reveal evidence in the case alleging Ryan Routh had written a letter detailing his plan to assassinate Trump. You can see it right there. It includes a $150,000 reward offer to anyone who could, quote, complete the job. Authorities do say Routh was armed with a rifle when hiding in the trees where Trump was golfing earlier this month in West Palm Beach, Florida. The 58-year-old has yet to enter a plea, but we did learn a few new things about his defense strategy during the hearing today. The National News Desk's Michael Magnoli has more.
The FBI says this letter was written months ago and that Ryan Routh was plotting to kill former President Trump, but he anticipated he might fail. I tried my best and gave it all of the gumption I could muster. It is up to you now to finish the job, and I will offer $150,000 to whomever can complete the job, the letter reads. But his defense team insists this note is proof that Routh was not attempting to assassinate President Trump, only to make headlines, because he wanted to draw the world's attention to the war in Ukraine and China's intention to invade Taiwan. We also learned that Routh arrived in Florida a month before the golf course incident. He has no ties to Palm Beach County, but according to the feds, he had been tracking Trump's movements and was keeping a list of places where Trump might be. Prosecutors also revealing they intend to ask a grand jury to charge Routh with attempted assassination of a political figure. That carries a potential life sentence. As for physical evidence, the feds say they have at least one fingerprint on the tape that attached the scope to the rifle. And 10 cell phones are in evidence so far. On one, the suspect was searching how to get to Mexico from Florida. The defense, hoping to convince the judge to grant bail, emphasized that Ruth cooperated with deputies when he was pulled over and that he never actually fired his weapon at Trump or anyone else. And they even showed a 30-year-old North Carolina newspaper article in which cops called Ruth a hero for helping to catch a rape suspect. The judge denied pretrial release, pointing to Ruth's 2002 conviction for having an explosive device.
And tonight, the Pentagon says the U.S. will send a small number of additional troops to the Middle East as the threat of a greater regional war inches closer to reality. The number of troops being sent still unclear, but they will soon join about 40,000 troops already in the region. The Pentagon acting as Israel and Hezbollah trade heavy fire. President Biden and other U.S. officials now working to de-escalate tensions, meeting this afternoon with the president of the UAE. Right now, Hezbollah rockets being launched at Israeli cities, while Israel has struck over 1,300 targets, it says, are affiliated with Hezbollah in Lebanon. The death toll in that country quickly climbing to more than 350, marking the deadliest day of Israeli attacks since at least 2006. Lebanon's health ministry reports at least 24 of them are children, 42 are women. It's unclear how many of the dead are Hezbollah combatants. The vast majority of Hezbollah rockets into Israel were intercepted. Meantime, the war in the Middle East, a large factor determining how one progressive demographic will vote in a key battleground state. In Michigan, Harris is ahead in the polls, but so far she's failed to garner the full support of what is a sizable Muslim and Arab community who feels she's not committed to reining in Israel's military campaign. And now Trump has picked up the endorsement of a local Muslim leader. The National News Desk's Atra al-Nashar reports.
In recent presidential elections, results don't get much tighter than they do in Michigan. In 2020, President Biden won by about 154,000 votes. In 2016, Donald Trump won by fewer than 11,000 votes. That's about 2 votes per precinct. That's why on Sunday, when the mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan, announced his support for former President Trump after a closed session in Flint, it made national news.
Toward the end of the meeting, he asked me, would you be able to endorse me and tell people to vote for me?
Khalib, a Yemeni-American leader in the first U.S. city with a Muslim-majority council, wrote on Facebook, "President Trump and I may not agree on everything, but I know he is a man of principles. And I'm ready to face the consequences."
We have hope that he will end the war in the Middle East. There is nothing worse than what's happening now.
During the state's Democratic primary earlier this year, more than 100,000 voters cast their ballots as uncommitted in response to President Biden's support for Israel. Leaders of the uncommitted national movement announced last week they will not endorse the vice president, but urge their supporters to not vote for Trump.
We believe that we can continue to grow our anti-war organizing power and really push for real change as it relates to failed U.S. foreign policy under a Democratic coalition. It's where we believe our power lies. It's where we've built strong connections.
The movement's co-founder, Lexis Zaydan, says Arab and Muslim Americans generally still see the Democratic Party as their political home. Harris leads Trump in almost every statewide poll, but it's a close race. The Hamtramck mayor may not be the person to turn that around. Khalib and the city council aren't exactly known for being progressive. Last year, they gained national attention when, during the middle of Pride Month, they voted unanimously to ban LGBTQ+ pride flags from city properties. Now, the mayor says he told former President Trump he'd like him to visit Hamtramck. He said he also expects the campaign to open up an office in his city to ramp up their ground game for the next 6 weeks. Amira?
Really interesting endorsement. And Atra, what do we know about third-party candidates in Michigan? Are they getting any traction as an alternative?
Well, the uncommitted national movement is not recommending a third-party candidate. That was part of their announcement last week. And they say that's because it could inadvertently help Trump in swing states like Michigan. But according to a late August survey of Muslim voters by the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, in Michigan, Green Party candidate Jill Stein has 40% of Muslim voters' support compared to Trump's 18% and Harris's 12%. Now, these numbers can get a bit sticky, and I did just speak to another group conducting a similar poll of Arab and Muslim voters that's set to come out later this week, and they're seeing more 50-50 support between Harris and Trump.
It's definitely a split demographic, that's for sure. All right, Atra al-Nashar reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Thank you. A schizophrenic man who killed 10 people at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, has been convicted of murder and faces life in prison. Ahmed Alissa has pleaded not guilty because of insanity in the 2021 shooting. His attorneys argued he was legally insane. Prosecutors had to prove Alissa was sane. They argued he did not fire randomly and was able to make decisions. Time is running out to stop the execution of a Missouri death row inmate convicted of stabbing a woman to death in 1998. Marcellus Williams set to be put to death tomorrow evening, but many people believe he's innocent. Today, the Missouri Supreme Court heard arguments about possible racial bias and prosecutorial misconduct, and the nonprofit The Innocence Project appealed the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. Concern right now growing about the potential for cars to be hacked. Today, the White House proposed a ban on Chinese and Russian software and hardware in internet-connected cars. Adversaries could collect data from microphones and other technology and could control cars remotely. The Commerce Department said the software ban would start with model year 2027 and the hardware ban would start in model year 2030. The International Association of Machinists strike against Boeing now in its 11th day. Today, Boeing says they have officially raised their offer to the union to end that strike. The new deal would give a 30% raise over 4 years. This is an increase over the 25% raise the union had voted down just 2 weeks ago. Boeing also said they would increase signing bonuses and retirement contributions. An IAM spokesperson told CNN that the union did not have an immediate comment on that new offer. Coming up, the latest forecast for what could become a major hurricane in a part of Florida that hasn't had one since 2018. Then, what new polls show about the state of the presidential race in Sun Belt swing states. And later, how many elementary schools are at a high risk for toxic pesticide exposure, according to a concerning new study. We'll be right back. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency in 4 counties in Florida and the Panhandle. The Gulf Coast currently on hurricane watch. Right now, a storm called Potential Cyclone 9 is brewing off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula just south of Cuba. It's predicted to form by tomorrow morning as a named tropical storm and then quickly strengthen into a hurricane. Too early to know right now the exact path of that storm, but the National Hurricane Center placing this cyclone on a likely path for the Florida Panhandle. Some models suggest this storm could be a major hurricane, Category 3 or stronger, by the time it makes landfall, which is expected to be Thursday evening. The last hurricane to hit the Panhandle of Florida was October of 2018, and you can see the devastation right there. Hurricane Michael made landfall near Panama City, west of Tallahassee, as a Category 5 storm with 140-mile-per-hour winds, the strongest hurricane to hit anywhere in Florida since 1992's Andrew. At least 45 people in Florida were killed by Michael. More than 60,000 homes suffered some sort of damage, many of them destroyed. More than 1.3 million people were left without power as that storm continued up the coast toward Virginia. Potential Cyclone 9 is predicted to head more towards the Great Lakes states, and we're going to know more about its exact path as it develops over the next couple of days. In Oregon, Christopher Meanely, a man with a heavy criminal history, has been arrested and indicted for second-degree arson and reckless burning that began the 18,000-acre Larch Creek wildfire right near Portland that began on July 9th rather. The difference between the charges: to prove arson, prosecutors need to show intent, while reckless burning is about starting a fire that got out of control. Officials say the cost of the fire exceeds $15 million so far. Well, with just 7 days to go before government funding ends, Speaker Mike Johnson has unveiled a new spending package to keep the government open until the middle of December that also has additional money for the Secret Service added into it. But this bill strips the election integrity measure that Speaker Johnson had pushed last week in the vote that failed. The bill has to pass out of the Rules Committee before then heading to the floor later this week. Former President Donald Trump campaigning in Pennsylvania today. He participated in an event hosted by the Protecting America Initiative in Westmoreland County, focusing on the Chinese Communist Party and its growing threat to the food supply chain and agricultural communities in the United States. Trump will also host a rally in Indiana, Pennsylvania this evening, and he's expected to outline plans to secure the border, slash prices, and release American energy. Vice President Kamala Harris, she is not campaigning today, but Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff is doing so in her place, speaking at 2 different events in San Antonio. New polling, meantime, shows strength for Trump in Sunbelt swing states. Polls from the New York Times and Siena College show Trump ahead by 5 points in Arizona, 4 points in Georgia. He won both states in 2016, but he lost them both in 2020. He also leads Harris by 2 points in North Carolina. A Times Siena poll released last week found Harris leading Trump by 4 points in Pennsylvania. That's regarded as the most important state this election cycle. And we have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Tennessee, where a woman solved her daughter's murder that was first ruled a suicide.
Nothing could bring her daughter back, but Dickerson could bring her daughter justice.
What led you to believe that Donovan killed April and it wasn't a suicide?
I knew that April was unhappy. I knew that she requested a divorce 2 weeks prior, and then she was dead 2 weeks later.
Dickerson spent months doing her own investigation after she says police refused to believe her.
This is the first autopsy stating that she had put the bag over her head and that it was suicide.
The key piece of evidence is this. Only Donovan Holt's fingerprints were found on the bag and tape.
That is when I confronted him and he confessed to me. And so that is when I went to the police.
Metro detectives questioned the husband and got a confession. Holt was arrested in Texas last week.
I'm 17 years old and I'm a senior at Marshall.
Samad Qureshi is passionate about his voice and his vote, but he can't say the same about his Marshall High School peers.
I saw in my community that so many other students were just not getting involved with the voter registration process or the civic process.
So that's when he stepped up and introduced the High School Voter Empowerment Act in Congress. It designated high schools as voter registration agencies, essentially expanding access for young people to get involved in their elections.
President Zelensky arrived to the Scranton ammunition plant just after 3 p.m. Sunday. His visit filled Ukrainian residents of Pennsylvania with hope and pride for their heritage.
It's important because I'm Ukrainian. My family was born there. They were chased out by the Russians. during World War II.
President Zelensky toured the Scranton plant that produces 155mm artillery shells, and it's one of the few facilities in the country to do so. Since the war with Russia started over 3 years ago, Ukraine has received more than 3 million of these shells from the United States.
And coming up, the action a group of parents have taken to protect kids from pesticides that are polluting the air around schools. Stay with us. Emerging science shows the potential health risks tied to a laundry list of pesticides that are routinely sprayed on U.S. land, sometimes near schools where children who are particularly vulnerable to those risks spend their days. Lisa Fletcher investigates how widespread that problem is.
I hope that as a society that we would place the health of our children above the look of a lawn.
But landscapes across America, from neighborhoods to playgrounds and school sports fields, are often coated in toxic chemicals. In fact, more than 1 billion pounds of pesticides are sprayed on U.S. lands every year and float beyond their intended targets.
These pesticides trespass on our property and into our bodies.
Ling Tan knows it well. She remembers smelling pesticides outside her Maryland home and worrying about her children who have asthma.
Everywhere my kids turn, they could not get away from it.
Kids are more vulnerable to the effects of the poisons in pesticides, potentially impacting their developing brains, organs, and immune systems.
Pesticides are, by design, designed to kill things, and the exposure to pesticides, especially to kids when they're still developing, can pose real harms.
Scott Faber is the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at the Environmental Working Group, which mapped thousands of elementary schools across America in the path of agricultural pesticides.
When you saw the results of that, what went through your mind?
Well, honestly, I was shocked. I had no idea that so many schools were that close to farm fields and that there was this risk.
EWG found more than 4,000 elementary schools located within 200 feet of a crop field where pesticides could be applied, leaving kids at risk of inhaling or ingesting the toxic drift. And the dangers go far beyond those 200 feet. We totaled the number of elementary schools within a quarter mile of crop fields and found nearly 26,000, which still isn't the end of the line. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, these sprayed poisons can float for hundreds of miles.
You'd think that we wouldn't need laws that say, don't crop dust the local school, but some states have had to pass laws to limit the spray planes from spraying over schools and spraying pesticides on our kids and teachers.
The protections vary from state to state. California and Texas require the use of low-risk pesticides. Louisiana and Pennsylvania require schools to track students who are sensitive to pesticides. Georgia and New Mexico limit the times when spraying can be done near schools.
There are no federal laws that are designed to take into account that schools may be disproportionately exposed or schools might be right next to farm fields.
In the absence of those laws, parents like Ling Tan are pushing ahead. She and just a few other parents raised concerns and got the first countywide ban passed on pesticides in the U.S.
It's really frustrating because as parents, we think that the government at the federal level is looking out for us. As a mom and as parents, we need to speak up instead of looking the other way.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Lisa, thanks for that report. And coming up, the records that were just broken in space as an astronaut and a pair of cosmonauts return to Earth. We'll be right back. Well, right now, we are taking a look at the moments NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson had to reacclimate to Earth's gravity. She just returned this morning on a Soyuz spacecraft, touching down in Kazakhstan, completing a 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station, where she conducted multiple scientific and technology research assignments. Now, the two cosmonauts that she returned with, Oleg Kononenko and Nikolai Chubb, spent 374 days in low orbit at the ISS, the longest time anybody has ever stayed on the station in a continuous stint. Kononenko, at 60 years old, also set a record for longest cumulative time spent in space at 1,111 days across 5 separate trips. And the WNBA had its most watched season in its 24-year history. Both A'ja Wilson and Caitlin Clark are credited for that. They did things no one has ever done before. Las Vegas Aces center A'ja Wilson unanimously won her 3rd straight MVP award, becoming the first WNBA player ever to score more than 1,000 points in a season this year. Her Aces also look to win their 3rd straight title, having won yesterday 78-67 over Seattle. As far as the rookies go, well, Caitlin Clark of the Indiana Fever, she unanimously became the Rookie of the Year, setting all-time marks in assists and most points ever by a rookie. Those two women will be in action tomorrow night as the playoffs continue. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. Have a wonderful night.